Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Playing Pretend with me, Chris McIlvenny. This week I am joined by the absolutely incredible Jenny Aurthur. Jenny is a writer and yoga teacher. She lives in New York City. She's originally from LA. She has the most interesting, crazy story. You're gonna love this one. It's heartfelt, it's honest, it's mind blowing. It really is. And she's such a legend through all of her ups and downs through life. She's always maintained a positivity mindset, and she's just a legend. So here it is. This is Jenny Arthur. Jenny, thank you very much for doing this. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
good. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Chris. You're lovely.
Yeah.
Good to meet you on the creative group. So yeah, I'm good. I'm in Brooklyn right now. It's a gorgeous day. Spring has sprung, and I'm wearing
Hmm.
stripes. So what more do you need?
Nice. Yeah, like you just mentioned, I normally start this podcast by saying how we first met. We first met in Gerling Hughes's like writing Zoom group, and that has just been a phenomenal experience for me because I'd never been involved in anything like that in terms of writing. One, but also the people that I've met throughout it. Like, like you live in Brooklyn. When would I ever get the chance to meet you? So making the world smaller. It was kind of the shining light out of this very dark time for me. I don't know if it was the same for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's amazing how mother. What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. Like suddenly we couldn't do anything, so we found a way, and it's like amazing how humans are so adaptable.
Hmm.
And actually thrive when we
Yeah,
have. Yeah. So no, I love meeting new people from. I mean, it's been great for me. COVID has actually been. It's horrible, but it hasn't really been that bad for me personally. But
yeah.
that's I know that may sound weird, but
No, well, I think everyone has because you can only uh understand your own experience of it. So if it's been good for you, then that's good. You've taken a positive out of it. Like for me, I know for me personally, like in terms of because I lived in England for 6 years, then I moved to Italy, and then COVID hit, so I moved back to Ireland, and I spent a year with my family, a year that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise because I never. It was never in my mind that I would move back to Ireland that soon. So having that year kind of it put things into perspective, and I was like, no, I've really loved having the chance to be here with them. So it was really good. But then once I got the chance to go back to Italy, I jumped at
like,
it.
that's enough.
A year's enough. A year's enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um.
I see.
Yeah. So just to start off, you had quite an interesting upbringing, childhood.
I
Uh,
did.
c- yeah. Can you tell me a bit about that? Los Angeles, are you from?
Yes. So I was born in Los Angeles. My parents who were political activists. So this was the early '70s, and they never got married, which I didn't know until much later in life. Not that it matters. I know that in Europe, no one gets married. A lot of people, it's like, why bother? But in America, that wasn't common, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so my parents were members of a political organization called the Communist Labor Party, different from the Communist Party. I'm not exactly sure how, but
Okay.
more about it's a little bit of a smaller group organizing labor. It's a movement to organize labor and unions and factories and
Mm-hmm.
as you know from how this country has turned out in the last 45 years, it didn't do much.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So, um, but it's kind of making a comeback. Socialism hashtag trending.
yeah. It's because it's interesting. I think America has kind of went like you said in the past 45 years, it's just gone like overboard with the capitalism. It's just like crazy. We'll just sell anything that we can, anything we can make money off. Yep, we'll do it. No problem.
Yep.
It's interesting. I don't know much about uh, I don't know much about America. I'm not from there, but it just seems like a very interesting place. But I suppose you don't really know any different. But growing up in something like that, so was it like I don't want, was it like a cult? What type of
Yeah, I
environment
mean,
was it?
when I didn't think it was at the time because it was just something my parents did all the time. We would go to, well, I lived in Los Angeles, and then we were we moved to New York, to Brooklyn, where my brother was born, and then we moved to Chicago, where we spent 7 years, and then they just had enough of it, and then we moved back to Los Angeles, where I like went to middle school, high school. I went to university there. So and it wasn't until much later that I was like, oh, wait a minute. My parents were members. It was kind of cultish, because we were just kind of told what to do, and we did it,
Mm-hmm.
and without a lot of. And my parents are not around anymore, and so I can't ask them,
Yeah.
and I've tried to talk to a few people. I've researched a few people that they knew at the time and trying to understand exactly what they were doing. And I'm yet to find out, to get a clear answer. But it wasn't like we all lived together. We were just kind of, we were told where to go. And like as a kid, I had to, my father wrote for a little newsletter called like the People's Tribune, and he would have us pass, like my brother and I had to go door to door and try to sell them. It was just not ideal for a kid, but my
Mm-hmm.
parents were like, well, what, it wasn't even a thought that might be something that a child wouldn't enjoy.
Yeah.
We went to
Yeah.
lots of demonstrations. We went to they'd had meetings every night about how, and I just see my parents like underlining things, and they took speed reading courses so they could read more of the like manifestos. And it was, yeah, really unusual as a kid.
So
And
in terms of like moving around, like
yeah.
like moving to Brooklyn, moving to Chicago and stuff, was that as a group you all did that, or just your family?
um I think like a few, maybe 25 people would go. Like
Okay.
we fit in a bus, and then we would kind of scatter and like find a place to live. I don't know if they did that for us. Although I do have a story for you that a friend of my mother's, who is still, she's like, and she just turned 80, and she lives in Brooklyn. One of those amazing miracle stories where she bought a brownstone in like 1978 for
Hmm.
$27,000, and it's like worth 3.5 million now. So
Wow, that's crazy.
yeah. But so she told me, because I was trying to get some information from her, she met my mother in the Peace Corps. And so that was before my mother was a member of the party, the
Hmm.
CLP. And so she told me once, she said, yeah, I went to go visit your mom when you were just a little baby. And I remember your mom was holding you, and she was in a dark room. She used to get these horrible migraines. And um, a woman came in and asked her to leave, and said, my friend, this woman Monica, my mother's friend, and she said, if you're not a member of the party, you're not supposed to be here.
Right.
And so I was like, really? That's so that was an interesting thing to learn, that they were very, there was a lot of rules, but I didn't know any of that until now, really, because they didn't talk about it when I was old enough to finally understand. Does
Yeah. And
that
so
make
what?
sense? But
Yeah. What age were you when then you left that way of life?
10,
10.
10,
Okay.
11. But like some of the things I grew up hearing, for example, that were very confusing. So we lived in these very like lower income neighborhoods,
Hmm.
the working class neighborhoods. And um, so I'd be sent to like a preschool that was like a Baptist preschool, where we would sit around singing songs about Jesus, and then go home at night. And then my father would tell me that God didn't exist, and God was created by people who didn't know why there was lightning and thunder, trying to appeal to like my 4-year-old brain. But I was like,
Hmm.
but I'm going to school and hearing all this other, it was, and it's funny how parents in the 70s were just like, oh, well, you'll be confused, but you'll figure it out at some point. And it's
Yeah.
so different now. So I was really, really, and also it was, I learned a lot of like, it's you and me against the world, kid. It was a lot of like, the world's out to get you. Like capitalists are gonna, like, I learned the word capitalist at like age, that was one of the first words, the
Yeah.
and the bourgeoisie. Like I learned, and so just very, and my middle name is Marx,
Okay.
so yeah,
Pretty
pretty
straight to the
full on.
point there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's all. So that yeah, at least it's kind of, people are like, oh, that's so cool. I'm like, it wasn't then, trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I would assume that if you're a member of the Communist Labour Party, like you would give all your kids the middle name Marx, or was it just you?
I don't know any other kids that were given that name. No.
Okay,
And I need to find those other kids. I have
you were the
no
special
idea what
one.
they are. Yeah. But Jenny Marks. And so my parents both just call me Jenny. A couple friends call me Jenny Marks, and I kind of like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like not just Jenny, Jenny Marks. Okay.
Jenny Marks? Yeah. It's just like I'm never just Jenny. It's like Jen, Jenny A, Jenny, J. Arthur. I mean, it's funny how people do that with your names, So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair. That's crazy. So you were 10 when you left that. So then were you living at that stage?
So after they decided to leave the party, we moved to Los Angeles, and then my parents were like, and we were thrilled because Chicago is a hellhole as far as I'm concerned. Like I just don't have a lot of good. It's freaking freezing.
Hmm.
Uh, it's like winter. It's cold from like November to May. Just
Yeah.
awful. So I just couldn't wait to move to California because I'd visited many times, and it was like that was the dream. And I remember being a kid and going, I feel so sorry for all these people that aren't getting to move to
Yeah.
California. So I was so excited to move there. We moved to so while my parents were trying to figure out what they were going to do for a living,
Yeah.
we lived in this little tiny apartment in Hollywood, and it was like a really dangerous neighborhood at the time. Now it's where like the Oscars are held, like in this one.
Okay.
But at the time, it was like super sketchy. This
Yeah.
1980. And my basically we didn't want to go. My brother and I, we were like, we refused to go to the to the camp. My mom wanted us to go. She's like, well, then you have to spend the entire summer indoors, and
Hmm.
you can't leave the house. And we chose that. So we spent 3 months in the summer inside, my brother and I, playing like solitaire. And
Why did you not want to go to the summer camp?
that that's like because I don't do group very well.
Okay.
Like it
Yeah.
was just felt it was I just don't remember not feeling like I belong there. My brother and I were like always looking for each other, and I just didn't enjoy being. We tried it one year, and I was like, never doing that again, Mom. And now I wish that I had more enthusiasm for socializing back then because I just didn't. I was scared all the time.
Yeah. And do you think that maybe comes from your family being closed off from like normal society type thing and being kind of the outsiders always? Was that kind of where
I
that
think
comes from,
so.
maybe? I
Yeah,
don't
I
mean
mean,
to psychoanalyze you or anything, but that it
but
kind of,
feel free. I'll take it. I'll take any of your thoughts on it. No, I mean for sure. Like I never felt like a normal kid. Like I always felt like a little bit. I still feel like I'm like an alien. Like how other kids were living that I saw in school when I was maybe fourth grade, fifth grade was not what my experience.
yeah.
And so and as a kid at that age, it made me feel more separate than
Hmm.
and seeing, oh, people have nice things, people where you live and what your house looks like is important to some people, and like having and fortunately my mother was like she had an incredible she really wanted nice things for us, so we did grow up with like having um we were never wanted for anything, but she
Yeah.
also taught us like to look appreciate beauty and art. My father taught us about art, so like they were very educated,
Hmm.
and I really feel like you're educated more at home anyway, in a way,
Yeah.
your parents find important, but I never felt normal. And as a
Yeah.
kid, I think you just want to just be like the other kids, and I felt like I had this secret,
Hmm.
you know
Yeah.
um yeah.
Fair.
I think
Um,
that yeah. So groups, I don't like. I'm like I don't do group. Like when people are like, "Let's all do this thing," I'm like, I always like to have like my own. I'm like I need an out. If I
yeah.
do something with a group, I'm like, okay, then I need to make sure I know I can get the hell out of there
y-
because groups bother me.
Yeah. Fair. Big groups or like is 5 people all right?
5 people are fine. I know, and that's why I feel like I was born for a pandemic. I'm like, oh, great. I
Okay.
don't have to like be in any kind of group. It's just, just that kind of thing where if you have too many people, everyone's like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Like, there's a lot of confusion as opposed to, um, I like things to be organized and like, what are we gonna do? I want to know, and rather than just hanging around, and I'm talking about socializing as well as, let me think of another, like if there's a chance that I can do something where I'm meeting someone as opposed to like let's all go together, I would
Hmm.
rather have like my own like just control over my movements,
Yeah.
because I had none, as we were just like we 3 different cities before I was 10,
Hmm.
and just always like being like where am I now and what. So my brother and I were really close because we were like soldiers we were in the trenches together.
Yeah. So then
Um,
after that, so then you were 10, you moved to Los Angeles. So then growing up as a teenager, what was that like in Hollywood? Uh,
Oh, we only lived in Hollywood for that summer.
okay.
But while we found another place, but I grew up in a part of Los Angeles on the west side near Culver. It's called Culver City,
Hmm.
and at the time, like we used to call it Culver Shitty because it was like so where people were like, "Oh, you live in," and now it's like one of the best places to live in Los Angeles. And of course,
Gentrified, yeah,
right,
standard.
totally gentrified. But it was so what was it like? So I started seventh grade, so I was 12, I think, or 11. Yeah, maybe I was 11 when I moved to California. I can't remember exactly, but so going to, I was like I was one of the smart kids, because I always just read. I was a big reader my whole life, and I did well in school. So I started off on a good foot, just being they had higher level classes for the smart kids, which I think is kind of odd.
Yeah.
But I was just in this completely new world where, like, California at that time, like 1981 on the west side was a very like, can I describe it? I don't know if you've ever seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I haven't, no.
You must put it on the top of your list,
I'll
okay?
put it
Because
on the
it's
list.
hilarious, yeah. And so it was just like beach culture, vans, skateboards, surfers, and I came from wearing like plaid woolen skirts and like button up. So I was like, what? So I quickly got a grip and like figured out what to wear and I made friends easily. But then I met some I went into with a bad crowd pretty quickly. And I don't really know why. They were just more exciting to me. Like they were
Hmm.
doing grown-up things. And my smart friends were just like studying for calculus. And I was like, who cares about that? So so I started going out to clubs and things like when I was 13,
What? That-
Yes, I mean, 13 years old, I got a fake ID when I was 13.
Well, how good is this fake ID to allow a 13-year-old to go to? Because you have to be 21 in.
Yeah.
That's
I
okay.
know.
That's
There was a place that actually sold them where you just bring a little picture and they'd like make one up for you. This was again before like everything was digitized,
yeah,
So and also there wasn't as much like you just didn't get in trouble like you would now,
yeah.
So we just yeah, clubs that would let 13-year-old girls in. That's pretty crazy. And I didn't think so at the time, but now looking back, I'm like, that's not okay, really,
And I can't imagine what type of establishment it was if it is letting people that are 13 years old in. What type of clientele do they have other than the 13-year-old girls? Like,
Oh, lots of kids, lots and lots of
okay,
kids. It was 18 and older, but everyone was younger.
yeah,
I was there. Most of the people there were around my age,
okay,
and it was a dance club and it was so fun. And, you could smoke inside and I started smoking. Anything anybody would tell me to do, I would be like, great, I'll do it. Like I just had no inner compass that was like,
yeah.
stay away from that, stay away from that. I was just like, give it all to me. And one time my father actually, I would lie to them all the time about where I was going because they were like, you're not going to wherever, Santa Monica to this club. So I'd be like, okay, and it's like sneak out the window. And then my father would see that I wasn't there. And he one time showed up at the club. My
Oh,
father, like I was like, sitting in the corner, like we weren't even drinking. Like we couldn't buy drinks there. We would get drunk before. That was the trick.
mm,
And suddenly I see my father out of the corner of my eye, like completely. I'm like in shock, and I just get up and follow him out. And so that none of my friends even know what happened. But I was like one of the most horrifying experiences of my life. And my father just standing there, like looking around, like seeing what was going on. It was like, oh my god, yeah. So they tried to control me, but I would not be controlled. So they
yeah,
finally, yeah.
fair. That I just because I know, like, obviously I grew up in Belfast, and there is a big like underage drinking culture. Like, I first drank when I was like 14 or 15, but I drank once, and I got what we call a barrack. I don't know why it's called a barrack, but it's 2 liters of cider, like yeah, cider, like and you just drink it, but you're 14, 15, so it's gonna get you really drunk. The first time I drank, like my friend was like falling over drunk, and he fell over and split his knee open, and I felt sober, and then seen that his knee like was split open, blood everywhere. So it just boom, the alcohol just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I was just out of it completely drunk, and I never drank again until I was like 17, 18, and you're allowed to drink when you're 18. But it's massive. It's a big thing, but not nightclubs, like parks and fields. Uh, and it's strange because I don't know. I it was just never for me. I was always like, I obviously tried it once because everyone was trying it, and then once I knew, I was like, no, I don't like it. So I don't like the taste. I don't really like the feeling. I was 14, so I was like, no, I don't like it. So then when I was 18, I kind of started drinking. Uh,
You became a big drinker when it was the right time. No, I mean, I feel like
yeah,
that's it's like alcohol. It actually most people like it makes them want to go to sleep or it makes them just feel shitty and then they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And for me, it was like, oh, this is so. I finally felt I started drinking when I was at around 13, and I remember the first time I drank, and I was like, this is so fun because I suddenly felt like I could just be more I was less self-conscious, and felt like funny. I felt more like I was a funnier, just more vivacious person.
hmm
Whether or not that was true is debatable, but I just felt like it. And so I just wanted to do that as much as possible.
yeah,
And it was just what we did. It was
yeah.
like there were like groups of categories of kids back then. There was like the stoners, you know, the heavy metalers that were like smoking pot with long hair, and then there was the nerds, who were, or the and the jocks, and then we were the new wavers.
hmm
So I have pictures and like just and we were freaks, really. Like we were just people like, what are you doing? Like just the makeup we would wear and the clothes we would wear, and we're really into The Cure and Madonna at the same time. So, but it was so we were kind of like rebels in
hmm
that way, um, and it was isn't it funny how the memory works? Like when I look back on things that were probably not great, I'm like, oh, it's so fun. Like the memory switches to like the positive,
Yeah.
as opposed to.
Well,
But
if you remember it being fun at the time, you're like, oh yeah, that was fun. And then you think about it and you're like, oh, that's maybe actually quite dangerous. But at the time it was fun and I'm still here to tell the story. So, well,
yeah,
it's all right.
it's a great story. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So, obviously that was like in your teenage years, but like, what was it like then going into like 18, 19? Did you go to college or anything?
Yeah, I went to UCLA,
Okay.
and which is like, I mean, I've got some angels up there like looking after me, because I've never been some of the things that have that could have happened to me when I was younger didn't,
hmm
but yeah, I did okay in school, well enough to just like I kind of coasted, and it was a lot easier to get into college back then than it is now.
Yeah.
I just read that in the newspaper just recently before I got on with you that tuition is like tripled since the 90s, which is I would have never been able to do it now,
Yeah.
But I went to UCLA, and I got a little bit more serious as I got older. Like
hmm
I started having like boyfriends who then I just wanted to be with my boyfriend rather than be with all my friends. So
Okay.
it kind of kept me in a way. It kept me sort of in a straight line, even though some of them were not great guys. It kept me home more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So I go ahead.
what were you studying in UCLA?
English literature.
Okay, I can see all the books behind you, so you kept up with it. Uh,
That's a real set behind me.
that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I always liked to read and write when I was younger, so it made the most sense to me. And I was like, what other major would you possibly? People were like, oh, marketing or something. I was like, what is that? Who cares? And now I'm like, God damn it, why didn't I do something like that? Where I could have like that's important now. I was like, what's marketing? Like marketing is everything now.
Yeah.
But no, but the what I had to read. I read all the classics, and then you read and then you talk about it and you write about it. I was like, what better? How much fun
hmm
that was for me at the time, and just I feel like um, reading really teaches you how to think, or being when you're in classes that you're like Shakespeare classes, you have to when you're analyzing and going, it teaches you how to read something and to think about it in a way. It makes you uh, like, is it a major that's going to lead to something that's like, okay, you're going into this, you're going to go be that thing? No.
Mm-hmm.
English literature is just more like teaches you how to think, I think.
Yeah. And so was it in terms of like reading stuff and writing about it, was it only like academic writing, or was there opportunity to do like creative writing, like write
Uh,
your own stuff?
Academic. It was like writing essays about something. Like, what's the like create? You know, have a theory about what this was. You know, why this writer did this, and then write about it. And so I got really good at that kind of writing. But
Mm-hmm.
then I started doing some creative writing on the side, and I was a um, recently. I don't mean to skip all over the place, but
It's all
this
good.
is one of my COVID discoveries. Is that so? You know, I'm trying to write now. I'm writing now,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been sitting around thinking like, why wasn't I encouraged by my parents to write? Like I was a good writer that and like why didn't I do it back then? Because I hear about my friends who are journalists and writers, and I'm like so jealous, you know, thinking like why didn't I do that? And then recently I was going through a bunch of boxes and I found some old high school newspapers and I wrote for the newspaper and was like, I did do it and I just forgot, you know? So I
Okay.
always, yeah. And so that was I was like, I was really relieved that I was wrong,
Yeah.
that it was my own choice not to continue that. It wasn't that I hadn't been encouraged because my parents were very like, you know, you're I always heard like you're so smart, you're brilliant, you could do anything you want, like just you know, and but not any real direction, just sort of like general, you
Yeah.
know. They
Do
just
whatever
thought,
you want and
yeah, you're
go.
great, yeah, you're so smart, you can do anything, but you know, didn't really stay on me, you know.
Okay.
Some
Yeah.
parents do, but and I read some articles that I wrote that were just hilarious. I mean, I was like, I have the same voice as I did when I was 17, which is
Mhm.
like I cracked myself. I was just like, this kind of like, it's still my voice, even though I was 17 years old. And I think that I don't know if that's good or bad, but I like it. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
I think that's very cool because it's just you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's
Yeah.
always been you. That's quite cool.
I've never tried to have like some kind of like persona, you
Yeah.
know, it's just like written from my own voice,
Yeah,
which
because
is,
I could imagine at 17 it would be quite like easy to fall into that to want to be sound like someone else and be like someone else and having opinions that maybe you don't have just to like I don't know, just impress people.
yeah, exactly. And I do though, I again, I can't, I don't know exactly because my father isn't around, but I was very influenced by his thinking and and I was a movie critic at the time
Okay.
for the high school newspaper. And when I read some of those things and some of the things I wrote, I'm like, did I really say that line? Because it sounds very adult, you know.
Hmm.
So I don't know if he was feeding me things, but he formed my thinking in ways that I didn't realize until much later. That I was always like, whatever he said was was truth, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever he thought. If he liked a movie, I liked the movie. If he didn't like it, but I liked it, I felt ashamed for liking it because he was just and he just had strong opinions and he was lovely, but I was like daddy's girl and I just wanted to be I wanted to think like he thought, which now I'm like, oh God, why did
Yeah.
what was I thinking? Because it wasn't really great how he thought, you know.
Yeah. Um. So when it then did you graduate from college and then have
I
to
graduated from
go into
college.
the big bad world?
Yes, I graduated from college. So I realized quickly that I was like, oh, wait, if I don't go to college, I'm going to have to work, you know? So I decided, I was like, I'll go to school. So I went to school, I went to UCLA and then graduating and going like, what now? Like, who knows when they're 23, what they're going to do. So,
Yeah.
but I did, one of the things I always wanted to do, or I was passionate about was films, movies. And like my grandfather was a producer. You know the movie All That Jazz?
Yeah.
Okay, he wrote that,
Wow.
produced that, and so I kind of grew up in a kind of a little bit of a Hollywood family.
Yeah.
And when we moved to Culver City, in fact, it was the home of MGM. You know,
Hmm.
and I lived in an area called Tara Hill, which was named after Gone with the Wind, and so all of it was like so. I was like, oh God, I'm in, and and I would stand outside the gates of MGM, just be like, oh, welcome, you know. and just so I wanted to make movies somehow, not sure exactly in what capacity. So my first job was at Creative Artists Agency, which was like at the time like just the biggest Hollywood agency that you could. It was like people were so impressed that I
Still
got
pretty
that
big
job.
now, to be fair.
Yeah,
CAA, like,
yeah,
that's big deal.
yeah, yeah. No, is it a big deal? Like I'm so out of that world now, but I guess yeah,
It's a
CAA
big
was
deal, yeah.
always yeah.
If you have any ins, yeah, I'd love to have CAA
Oh,
on.
I have some so funny, but it was yeah. I got a job there and quickly realized like that was not the agency world was not for me because it
Mhm.
was so and it was like this was like 1990. I remember it was when Pulp Fiction was coming out. So
Yeah.
and Miramax was just beginning and Harvey. So it was very like big time in Hollywood. Not that there's
Mhm.
ever isn't a big time, but it was very exciting time,
Yeah.
just all of that, those independent films. And I was an assistant to a talent agent. And
Okay.
so have you heard anything about the Mark what's his name, Scott Rudin stories that have been going around? Do you know who that is?
Oh, the Broadway guy?
Yeah, but he's actually a Hollywood guy too.
Oh, okay. Because
And
I just seen it because he was producing the is the Music Man on Broadway, and he's like dropped out of it. But yeah, I don't know much about it.
yeah, he's like a notorious prick in Hollywood, like just abusive. And like so now all these stories are coming out, like assistants from the past are like, oh, he did this. And that was kind of that was sort of the culture at the time, was just like, you know, treat like you have to treat your assistants like you'll have to harden them so they can handle. But and so I was lucky enough to have a woman who was an agent who and I learned, I mean, it was like I learned in 1 year of working there, it was like an education of how Hollywood worked. And so like that was invaluable. How, I learned, it was really fascinating. They didn't pay us anything,
Yeah.
but we would roll calls and I would get to listen to all the phone calls between the agent and the clients or the producers or the studios or whatever. It was just to be a fly on a wall and get to listen was
Hmm.
amazing. Um, and yeah, so that was, and also all the assistants were the same age. We were all like 23,
Yeah.
24. And we would all hang out together and complain together, but it was such like a huge badge of honor to work there, even
Hmm.
though it was hell, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, because I can imagine all like obviously I've had agents and stuff, but all I really know of that world is Ari Gold in Entourage. Have you seen Entourage? Yeah.
Yeah,
How close to the truth is that?
very.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see, I mean, like Ari Emanuel is who that character is based on. And he
Hmm.
like, he now has his own, but I think he used to be at ICM. It doesn't, yeah, but just very, very male, very, misogynist, very, I mean, so much sexual harassment. When I hear like women, millennials saying like, what that, I'm like, oh, you have no idea what it's like to be really harassed.
Yeah.
I'm not talking like assaulted, but just the way that you would be spoken to.
Yeah.
Um, and like you'd see Al Pacino walk down the hall while you were sitting at your desk, and I met, or who were some of I got to go to movie premieres, so all of that was like that made up for the money that we didn't make.
Yeah. And that's so cool in your early 20s as well. You're just like, well, I want to make movies, and now there's Al Pacino walking down the hall.
Yeah,
That's what
exactly. And it's like
dreams are made of.
totally. And I remember once meeting Brad Pitt. Like this is 94. It was like Legends of the Fall time. I don't know if that, and he came into our office and was standing there, and I was like, because I wasn't a Brad Pitt fan, and he was like, whatever. And I was like, oh wow, this person has that like thing. Like you
Mhm.
just look at them and you go, you're a star. You have that X factor, and I get it. I don't
Yeah.
care what comes out of your mouth. It doesn't matter. You just have this golden light around you. And George Clooney is like that too.
Hmm.
I got him and I was like, oh, he's got it too. Just something, just
Yeah.
you have it too, Chris. Don't worry.
I don't know. I don't know. Just after you've dropped Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Chris McIlvenny doesn't really fit in there.
I mean, it's just,
I
it's
appreciate it though.
yeah, but no, but it's a sort of charm. It's like just a niceness, like just kind, but also just very powerful presence, and
Hmm.
in that during those times, I was like, oh, that is something that cannot be created. It's you have it or you don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've met a few people like that, and it's interesting. Like it's almost like a visceral thing. Like you see them, and you're like, "Oh, I can feel your energy. You're just the coolest, most chilled out person, and so confident, and just it's like the whole room just goes, oh yeah,
Exactly.
there they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I like to think I have that,
Yeah, I think we
especially
all do, but
if
we,
I have it in my own house with no one else around, and it's just
yeah,
my dog. I
me
definitely walk
too.
around with that energy.
Yeah, it's funny
Yeah.
because I'm living in Italy at the minute, and I'm teaching kids, and like I teach babies in the morning, but in the afternoon I have like 10, 11 year olds, and it's the best because it is like a performance for me because I'm like I don't really know how to teach, but I'm gonna do it, and I just have it's like a stand up 2 hour stand up set because I'm just having the most fun making them laugh, and I'm like yeah I have that energy when I'm like yeah I'm Brad Pitt in here. You better respect me. Uh,
but but you do though. You're not like because I taught English in Japan,
mhm.
and so and I was like I didn't know how to teach anything, but they were like just you'll figure it out, and so I was just like sent off to Japan. I took myself there and I made you know I had no idea what I was doing. But I think and I'm a teacher now as well. I
Mhm.
teach yoga still, and a teacher is a teacher is a teacher. And it doesn't matter what you're teaching. It's about how well can you communicate something
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
I've had
That's
amazing teachers who are terrible teachers because they didn't make sense. I was like,
yeah.
you have a lot of information, but I don't understand what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. That's it. What I find is like although I do look at it as a performance because that's kind of the way my brain works. So I try not to think of it as teaching, but then when I see their progress and how much they have learned in a 2 hour lesson with me, I'm like, oh yeah, shit, that's teaching. I did it. And
Yeah.
when they're able to like respond to you in English, I'm like, you can speak English because of me. You know what a waterfall is. Yes, love it.
It's so fun, isn't it? It's
It's the
really
best.
fun.
It's so
Yeah.
good. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I do, but yeah, it's been good.
And
Um,
you're in Italy for fuck's sake. I mean, Jesus.
Jeez, I eat pizza and drink beer and walk along the beach. It's pretty sweet. I'll
Yeah.
take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How long were you with CAA to
I was
a
there
bit
for
back
just
there?
over a year because if you're not going to become an agent, it's like it's your boot camp, and then you get another job in Hollywood. So I
Okay.
went from that to I got a really good job as a story editor, which sounds different than what it actually is. Like if we're working for a Demi Moore's company.
Okay.
Um, does anyone know who she is anymore?
I
Demi Moore anymore?
Ghost Ghost still is up there with my
Yeah,
favorites. Like
at this time she was the highest paid actress in Hollywood. She did a movie called Striptease that was absolute garbage, but
yeah,
it was 20 million for a leading role, which was at that time the biggest.
yeah,
And so everyone was like, "So, oh wow, you're going to be working for her." And it was like it's a film company, so it was a production company, but that didn't actually, nothing ever happened. It
hmm
was a lot of like read scripts, write coverage, meaning like write synopses of the script. Is this something worth us like going through? What books are coming out? Like I was looking for material,
hmm
but the job was really like just sitting at a desk under fluorescent lights, and I just hated it
yeah,
because I found it. I realized that Hollywood was really it really broke my heart because like I said, I was standing at the gates of MGM like this is magical, and then learning that actually most of the people that I came into contact with were not nice at
no,
all. Like not really, just not nice, not creative. It was more like something people wanted to do for um, because it was a cool thing, and I really wanted to do it because I loved movies. Like I had like when I was a kid, I would go to triple features,
hmm
like of spaghetti westerns with my dad, or like James Bond movies, or and silent anything. I just was like, so I would get the TV guide every, it would come in the mail on the Sunday newspaper, and I would like circle the movies that were on at 3 a.m., the old movies, and I just learned about like screwball comedies, and so I just was really into it. And so when I saw that other people that were in the business were not into it, it was
Yeah.
more like
Yeah,
it
it was a business and not for
yeah,
the
and
love
not
of it.
exactly. And I so I tried a couple more. I had a couple different jobs doing other things. I was trying to move around to see if there was any area that I could get into. And the one area I didn't get into, which I think I may have enjoyed, would be like actual production,
Hmm.
where you're like running, like I was like, I think I'd make a good line producer, somebody who's just like, just delegate and get things done rather than sitting at a desk. Like I just couldn't stand it. It made me nuts.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so but it was a great, besides it completely shattering and breaking my heart, it was a great education. I didn't go to After that, I didn't see a movie for like 10 years. Like I was
Really, it just put you off.
fuck
It was like,
Hollywood. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a great time for Hollywood anyway, like the 90s. I'm
Hmm.
trying to think, you know um uh,
There was like, I think with the 90s, it was like, there was specific movies, but like on the whole, that was just like a load of shit. And then you had the wee ounces of gold in there. You had
yeah.
your Pulp Fiction, your Forrest Gumps, your like really big
Wait,
ones. And
do you
then
like Forrest Gump? Do you like Forrest Gump?
I like Forrest Gump mainly just because I love Lieutenant Dan, and I love Tom Hanks. So uh,
It's so I can't I
you don't like Forrest Gump?
Forrest Gump. I was like, this is, well, it was during that era that was beginning of like the cripple, or the the person who, it was like that has some um Rain Man. You remember? I was like, these movies where somebody is just like not fully uh like Forrest Gump. I mean, he was kind of, what was he like? He's just like an idiot, right?
Yeah. I don't really know. I don't know. How do you like Forrest Gump's like just like a
Like, and just like boo, 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 just kind of like prattling around, and then winning an Oscar. I was like, why is that an important movie? I don't understand.
I don't think it's an important movie. I just think I don't know. I just love it. It's but the
You're
thing is,
not alone. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I don't know. I was brought up on, well, not brought up on Forrest Gump. That'd be weird. But like it was just one of those things that like you Forrest because Forrest Gump. So it's interesting to see like TV in the UK and Ireland. Like so a certain movie would be sold to a channel. So say ITV, which is like Channel 3, would be sold to Channel 3, and they're gonna get their money's worth. So it would
Yeah,
be
and they're
on
gonna repeat it.
over and over and over. So if ITV, so it'll be on ITV1, ITV2, ITV3, ITV4 every every day. So you're just like,
Yeah,
well, Forrest Gump's on, so I'm gonna watch it.
right.
And the music, I love the music in it too.
Well, I should go back and see what the music was, but I just remember going, I just didn't understand what it was. And then people at the time were like, Jenny, I would get that a lot. Like, but I did like, for example, like what other, I'm trying to think. I know this isn't a movie podcast, but it is Play Pretend.
It is
So
playing
like,
pretend, yeah.
what is your, what movie, I'm interviewing you now, Chris,
It's
switching
all
the
good.
train of
My
what movie,
favorite movie.
yeah, if you
My
could name
favorite
one.
movie is you're not gonna like this. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, it's a great movie. What are you talking about?
I don't
Yeah.
know. I just yeah. Yeah. I love it. I think everyone in that is just on point. It's like every day they showed up the set and they knew exactly what they were doing and they smashed it. It's so good. I love it so much.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go watch it again. I'll go watch it again. Yeah, what I'm trying to think, the movies that I can watch over and over and over and over. But I mean, I like love The Godfather 1 and 2, and
Mm,
Raging Bull. Those
yeah.
kinds of movies. I love, like, I'm like, why do I like such violent movies? I think that also I had this idea that I wanted to be like either I wanted to be a Bond girl. I was like,
Hmm.
that's the fucking coolest thing you can do, is just be, and but not one that gets killed at the end, not one that
Okay.
actually becomes an ally somehow and like helps Sean
Yeah.
Connery. Or like a mafia wife. I was like, I just love the idea of just being in um doing something illegal, or just being kind of under the radar and just doing
Yeah.
things like getting one over on the government.
Yeah, well, they were always the coolest. Like if you're helping like a special agent, or you're like I one character I actually always like. You just said mafia boss's wife. Is Tony Soprano's wife in The Sopranos.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, what a character! And she's so good, and it's really interesting because you're like she never really talks about like how much she knows or about the business. It's just like, well, that's just what he does. That's what he does. And
Yeah,
you're like, you're good as fuck. Yeah, you're a
I
legend.
love Edie Falco. She's
Yeah,
so
she's so
good.
good. So,
Yeah.
so good. Um, yeah. Oh, I forgot we were doing a podcast. Yeah. So yeah. So you worked for Demi
Demi
Moore's.
Moore.
Um, and then was that
Then I
not?
went to, and that was soul crushing completely, because I
Mhm.
was just not. I was what I was meant to do was like make connections. Like they were like, call all the other story editors in Hollywood and have lunch with them, and I was just it was like, I don't want to spend my free hour at lunch like talking to another. So I
Yeah.
wasn't good at it. Like I'm just not a good schmoozer. I'm just
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. I'm not good at that
I'm
either.
just no. I don't want to pretend like I like someone when I think they're full of shit.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a straight shooter that way. And so right after I left that job, I moved to Japan, and the reason I'm connecting the two, because I became a hostess in Japan, in Osaka, which is hostess clubs, which are like the men would come in and we serve them drinks, and
Hmm.
there's different shady parts of that, but I wasn't involved in that. I was more
Yeah.
interested in the Australian and the English guys than the
Hmm.
Japanese guys. But I was a terrible hostess because I had to pretend that I was interested in talking to these Japanese businessmen.
Yeah.
And this one I was hired by a Ghanaian guy who owned a hosta club, and he hired me because I was like, 25 and just from California. And he was like, I want you to be like a Dallas cowboy cheat. Like he wanted me to be like this all American girl. And I was like, sorry, I'm just don't give a fuck. Like I just don't. And so I was not able, I just never took advantage like I could have, because
Yeah.
I just couldn't be bothered.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I moved to
Japan's an interesting place. I don't know if it's somewhere because I don't know why, and it might change. Like I've loved being in Italy and like immersing myself in the culture, but the culture really isn't that much different from like our own. It's just similar. But I think like a place like Japan or India or China, they frighten the life out of me because I'm like, how different must it be over there? Like just a different world, and that scares me.
Oh, you would love Japan though. Like I've been back to Japan many times since, and it's such an incredible country. I have no desire to go to China, zero.
Hmm.
I have no desire to go to India. I'm just like I have so many other places on my list before. Like
Yeah,
I'm never been to Ireland. I want to go to Ireland so
you
badly.
got to go to Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah, and Scotland. I feel like I was definitely lived there at some time in my past lives, because I'm
Hmm.
just like so connected to it in some ways. But Japan is fascinating, and it's beautiful, and the people are really really wonderful, and they love Americans. Which when I went there, I was like so puzzled, because I went there thinking, wow, they're gonna hate me. We bombed the fuck out of them, like
Yeah.
we fought and nope, just they just embraced it. Oh, American. Oh, and when I lived in Los Angeles, oh, Dodgers, LA Dodgers. It's like anything that I would say that, like, because Nomo was this baseball player in LA
Hmm.
that was Japanese, and so I just knew the code words.
Yeah. Yeah.
LA Dodgers, and I was like just a star just for being from there. So it was
Yeah.
really, yeah.
That's funny. So how long were you in Japan for?
I was there for about 6 months,
6 months.
and yeah, and just had the best time. I mean, I was the first time I was like really on my own, like not with like living with my boyfriend who I was with at the time, and man, when you're let off a leash at all, like from family or friend, and it was wild. Like I was a bartender, I was a hostess, and I was a teacher. So I had
Yeah.
like 3 jobs,
Wow.
and I just made they pay in cash, tons and tons of cash. So I just had piles of cash
Hmm.
that I don't think that's the case anymore,
Hmm.
but it was during kind of the bubble.
Yeah.
And then the plan was to then take all the money I made and then travel all around Southeast Asia, which is what I did.
Unreal. That's
And
cool.
I didn't have a plan after that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I did, but yeah, the plan didn't work out.
So you moved from, oh, okay. So then you travel around South East Asia and then back to LA, or
Well,
uh
I had a friend. So my friend, one of my closest friends, she's English, actually, Penny. She got us a gig working. She like a little house outside of the city, which was like the city was. It's so Blade Runner, Osaka. It's
mhm,
still it's just like really. It's so ugly. It's beautiful. You know,
yeah.
like so much cement and steel. But we were going to go live in the country and work at this little school and to get paid a really good salary. So I went home for the holidays. So this was around November, December, and the plan was to then go back to Japan.
Mhm.
But my brother, I had my younger brother who'd been struggling with um, depression and anxiety and psychosis for 5 years. He ended up taking his life the day before I got back
Oh
from
wow.
Japan. The day before, which I was like, how did you, like, my parents picked me up at the airport and my
Wow.
boyfriend was supposed to pick me up at the airport, and immediately my first thought was like, where, he broke up with me, where, and then it wasn't. And it was so weird, Chris, because when I found out that it wasn't that my boyfriend had not broken up with me,
Mhm.
that it was my brother, there was this like weird moment of relief, and then I was like, oh, no, you can't feel relief
Yeah.
about, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
yeah, I do. I do. It's like relief that because in your head you're thinking the worst thing that could happen is that my boyfriend's broke up with me, and you find that out, and you're like, no, and then
and
obviously
then
it
it
doesn't
hits
hit
you
you.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
And I remember getting it, and my boyfriend was out. He oh God, it was just the night, but it took me a while. We didn't have cell phones back then like we do now. I mean, they did in Japan. They were so far ahead of us. But I remember I was at the airport because I had to go to Kuala Lumpur and then back to LA, and I was like calling my boyfriend, and he knew that it was me calling, but he wouldn't pick up because he knew,
yeah.
because my parents had called him, and it
Hmm.
was just so he was outside, and I remember getting in the car, and I was just like pissed. You know, I
Yeah,
wasn't even like, I was more like, really? Like, this was supposed to be the time I come back and enjoy my family. And now
yeah,
this horrible thing, like my parents were, my mother, especially, like losing a kid is just to be around that for, it was, there's no just way to describe how hard that was to just see my parents in that state of like trying to save his life for so many years and then just,
yeah.
he jumped off a bridge and
Wow.
um, he tried so many ways to kill himself. Like the doctors were like, I don't know how this kid is still alive. Like he stabbed himself in the heart. And he was like
Wow.
a millimeter away from like, and he tried to he just did everything. And then he ended up managing to kill himself by a very short fall. Like it was a bridge not leading to, not for water, but for the freeway. And he could have easily just been a paraplegic for the rest of his life.
Yeah, yeah.
So he heard voices. It was awful. It was really terrible but I felt also like I'd lost him so many years earlier because he'd been going through it for so many years.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I resented it because he just got all of my family's attention went to trying to help him, which I
yeah.
understood, but I was still like, you know,
Well, yeah. At the end of the day, like you're in your early 20s, and obviously you've had a bit of a mad start to your life, like all of what had happened when you were younger, and then the teenage years, and then you had moved to Japan. You were like, this is it, and obviously with your brother, it's like I find it interesting that it's like you felt like you lost him before, um,
exactly.
but it doesn't make it any easier.
No,
It's so it's like you lost him twice. So it's like
yeah.
horrific,
And
absolutely horrific.
he's really gone, and my parents are fucking devastated.
Yeah,
And it was like my mother's grief took up all the space. It was almost like there was no, there. And I didn't know this at the time. I was 25, and I was like, I just was like resentment. Was like, well, what about me? Like all of these letters were coming, like notes and flowers, and I was kind of like just the sister. Like I was you know.
Yeah.
And it was always like, Jenny's going to be okay. That was just Jenny's very, what was the word that I was, she's so capable. That was always what my mother called me. She's like, you're so
Hmm.
capable. So I was like going to be okay. And I really wasn't, you know,
Yeah.
I was
And
out of my mind.
yeah, and the thing is, you would almost think that like they would maybe learn from what had happened to your brother with looking out for you, especially now that you had lost your brother, and like the possibility that that could happen. And it's it's one of those situations. Like suicide is horrific, always horrific, and in Belfast, Northern Ireland especially, it's a serious, serious problem. Like an epidemic. It's really, really bad for young men in their late teens, early 20s.
What's the
And
reason? Like, what are they saying is the
you know
cause
what?
of?
They really don't know. They really don't know what the reason is. And like some there's only speculation, and some say maybe it's a post-conflict thing with obviously all the years of, but the thing is, a lot of these guys are my age, so never grew up in the conflict.
Right.
So I don't know whether it's like I don't know. I really don't know what it is, and it's horrific every time it happens because it happens so often.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but my brother suffered quite bad with depression a while back, and he tried to take his own life. And like you said, seeing your parents grieve like that. Like, luckily he was all right and he survived and he was okay. But like them being like, oh my god, like the possibility of losing a child, and you're just like, I'm going through my own stuff in my head here of what I've just witnessed and what has happened, but like I can't imagine what you're going through. And we were offered like counseling, and I think my mom and dad took it up, and my brother obviously did. My other brother, I don't think did, but I was like, no,
No, we
I
know. I was like, no, fuck you. I don't want anything. My parents were like, you should do this thing. I was like, no,
yeah,
I'll do it my way, you know.
yeah,
And my
it's
mother was like, sorry,
nope. Go ahead.
my mother was she was such an amazing woman and so open, and like it was she would just like talk about it with anyone, you know, like we'd go to the market, the Trader Joe's, and she would just say, it's like somehow, I don't know how it would even come up, it didn't come up, but anything, my son just died, to the checkout person. I'm like, mom, you know. And it was, and the person, I mean, it's horrible for, but she just was like, just her heart was like on every part of her body, it was just exposed and
Yeah,
been going. And it was like, I was embarrassed and felt bad for her. It was just so many different feelings of like awfulness, you
yeah,
know. And she never ever recovered. You just don't, you know.
yeah,
um and you know, it's been 25 years now, and it's why it's like I don't, it's half, like I've lived longer now than I did without him than I did with him.
hmm,
So he's not so much on my mind, but I also knew as a child, like I remember thinking I could never picture him as an adult. Like I was like,
okay,
I just don't see him, because like my mom, he was so sensitive. Like my mother once hit a bird like driving, and he like was inconsolable, and I was like, ugh. Even at the age 7, I was like, I don't know how he's going to, at that young of an age, I was like, oh no, like how's he going to survive?
hmm,
The world is hard, a hard place, as I'd been told by my father forever.
hmm,
You know.
yeah,
uh, yeah. And then more suicides ensued. It was just like one after it was just one, you know. After that, um I stayed in LA. Unfortunately, you know, I was supposed to move to Japan, I didn't, so I stayed in LA, broke up with that boyfriend, got another boyfriend. I used to just vine swing, you know, just like
yeah,
couldn't be alone for a day.
hmm,
And now all I want to do is be alone. But then so just I stayed there, and then my father, who was suffered from depression, but it wasn't obvious, you know, he decided to write a book about my brother's depression and suicide. And
okay,
I feel like I even have it somewhere on this shelf. So he spent years writing that. It came out, and 4 people read it, you know. But his whole point was trying to understand my
yeah,
brother's condition. And you can't understand something like that. Like you can't make sense of something that's that awful. And
Yeah.
so, and I finally read the book, uh, and even he was it was so mental, you know, it wasn't
Yeah.
trying to figure it out, and you can't. It's
Yeah.
like, and then, so then finally 8 years later, I'm moving. I became a yoga teacher, which
Mhm.
was not planned really. Like, not, I didn't make a lot of good career moves later in life, you know, because it's not I just loved it though. And I had a boyfriend at the time who made enough money to support both of us. So, and then I started to make some money. Like, again, I had hundreds in my, I'd get, it was during before everyone was a yoga teacher, and
Yeah.
I had private clients who were the people that I worked for in Hollywood earlier,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they didn't know that I was that same person, but like I was teaching the head of CAA like once a week, this guy
Yeah.
Richard Lovett, and I was like, this is hilarious, because I'm like, okay, Richard, he's like down on the floor, you know, I'm like, close your eyes, breathe in, hold your breath, hold your breath. Like I was like completely like, and he was at my mercy, and it was just
Yeah.
such a satisfying feeling, you know. And I taught a bunch of celebrities, and that was really fun. But in 8 years later, the company I worked for, where they're like, we're moving to New York. Would you like to go and like set it all up? And I was like, absolutely, because I just broken up with the boyfriend of 8 years, and I was
Uh-huh.
single and always wanted to live in New York. So I did that, and I went to New York for a few weeks to do like the initial meet and greet, and called my parents, and I was like, I'm so excited, you know, I have a place to live, I have a job, like, and my parents were like, awesome, great, great, great. Go back to LA for this holidays again, like November, December.
Mhm.
My dad picked me up from the airport, and I remember his face too. I remember like the word that kept coming to mind is like stricken. He just looked stricken. I was like, what's, but I was too, I'd gotten drunk on the plane and was like
Okay.
in a fight with my friend who I was flying with. And so I didn't really acknowledge it. And we were driving home. He was taking me home. And was sitting next to him, and he like grabbed my hand, which it was so odd, because it was just not something that he would do. And he took me home, and then I never saw him again, because then 3 days later he disappeared. Like my
Wow.
mother was like, yeah, my mother was like, called me this night one night, and she's like, have you talked to your father? And I was like, no, why? She's like, he hasn't come home since, like, he left this morning, and he hasn't come home. And I was like, oh, don't worry about it. And because it would never occurred to me ever
Yeah.
that, and it took a week for us to find, he had gone up to some mountain, this mountainous region area near Los Angeles, and jumped off a fucking cliff, you know. And it was, again, yeah, I mean, I can't, I'm just like, how could you do that to me? You know, I mean, which is not really fair, because it's not about me, but I always thought it was, because my dad said my whole life, like, it's me and you, girl, me and you against the world. Like, he was always like, my girl, you know. And then he left me with my
Yeah.
mother, who was kind of just like I kind of described earlier, just very, um, I always thought she'd be the one to die first, just
Mhm.
because she had some health issues,
Yeah.
and he's so healthy. Like, the week before he killed himself, he like was at the, you know, got his teeth fixed, and like it was just didn't make any sense.
Yeah, and what also doesn't make any sense is that he would spend so much time like writing a book trying to understand what your brother went through and why he came to that decision, and then he would end up making that the same decision. That
Yeah,
is the most baffling thing ever.
beyond. Yeah, and not only that, Chris, but like he kind of botched it in a way, because like the way he drove his car up to this place that was like an illegal parking spot, and then it got towed. Okay. And
Okay.
he had gotten out of the car. I don't, you know, I can't even imagine what he was thinking, but the car got towed because it was illegally parked. But his plan, I think, was for somebody to see the note inside the car on the seat that was like, when you find my body, contact this person. That was the note. That was it.
Okay.
Okay. And then it was my mother's name. So for a week we were looking for him, and it was during the week of Thanksgiving, which was like our favorite time of year as
Hmm.
well. And so we were like, he'll come back, he'll come back, where is he? And then it's just started to hit us like, you know, what, where the hell is he? And exactly a week later, my mom called me and was like, they found your father. But it took a week because no one saw the note. So like he did, it's like, So I think of him lying there in this like weird mountainous area, like being, you know, for a week,
Yeah.
just like, um, and I
And
guess his way of saying goodbye to me was like holding my hand that night. But
yeah.
here's the thing is that it was again right before I was about to make this huge move and move to another place. And I was like, really, like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, again, it's
Yeah.
not about me, but it was like such like what how was I Hitler in the
Yeah.
past? Like, why can't I move on with my life,
It's there's a lot of things that are just crazy about that. But like with the week that it took to find him, like what was going through your heads? Because obviously you would never assume that he would do that. So what?
Yeah. Well, first, what because my father was he was a bit of a he was he was his own man. Like in a lot, like when I was younger, he had like this midlife crisis where he just took off for Sedona, Arizona, and like to, and he wouldn't really tell us much. And so in a way, it was like, okay, he just did something again. Like he just went off to go be on his own, and he'll come back. And then it just, as the days passed, it was just like, this isn't possible. Like we just didn't know what to think, but we really still could not fathom that he would do that.
Yeah.
Like maybe he got in a car accident or maybe he got or something, but like to actually do exactly what your son did, you know and the other thing is I learned was that it was on his father's birthday when and my grandfather, his father who made all that jazz,
Hmm.
died when he was 56. My dad was 56 and he did it on his father's birthday, who died
Wow.
when he yeah. And so I don't know what that kind of like,
Yeah.
and there's no family left on his side that it just, but none of it I can't, you know.
And there was no note, only just the note to say, "Wow."
Yeah. But then when we looked at, when we, went in through his things, like he had a list of people that I think was like for us to call, he kind of like, or, I mean, clearly he was out of his mind and
Mhm.
didn't, I think that he, I've read about a lot about suicide and been in, after that, I did start going to like suicide groups,
Mhm.
suicide survivors. And because I was older and like ready to kind of tackle it. But,
Yeah.
is that people who kill themselves really just think that their presence on the planet is not important to anyone and that they're doing people a favor by
Yeah.
leaving, So, but that was, yeah, I mean, that's when I went off the rails in terms of like my personal life. Because I basically, I was like, it's me or my mother,
Yeah.
either I have to go on with or I stay in LA to be with my grieving mother again and then
Mhm.
put off my plans again. And I was like, I can't do that. My mother, she understood, but she died like in her sleep 2 years later. So yeah, so it was like, and not that she wouldn't have if I'd been there, but I think it was just loss after loss after loss. And
Yeah.
um,
She just
yeah,
couldn't go on anymore.
yeah, I just
Um.
couldn't.
Wow. So when you say you went off the rails, did you move to New York and?
Yeah, well, I moved to New York, and I was like, I was in shock first of all.
Mhm.
So I was. How long do we have, by the way?
As
Because I
long
could
as you
talk
want.
for hours. Yeah.
As long as you
Um,
want.
uh, I was single for the first time. I was completely like, I don't know if you've ever been in shock. Have you?
No.
Yeah,
Not
it's
really.
like you don't real like how your brain keeps you okay. So, but I was like basically just in denial about everything that that had happened, and I just was in New York City, which is the greatest place on the planet. And still feel that way. And I was just remember I was just hopping down the street, like going, "Oh my God, it's the greatest city in the world!" And I had just been dealt this huge blow.
Mhm.
So I was not dealing with it, and so I was just like, meeting guys and going out, and that's all you do in New York City. And I was a yoga teacher, so my hours were you don't work that much as a yoga
Yeah.
teacher. I tell people, I'm like, my life is like a long summer vacation, you know,
Yeah.
because after I work a couple of hours a day. I mean, this is changing now, but
Mhm.
just drinking and just, I always loved drinking, but I really started to love it because that's all. No one goes to anybody's apartment in New York. You go, we'll meet you at the bar, and whenever someone had drugs, I was like, sure. Like, I just was like, any alter me,
Mhm.
just put me in an altered state. I don't care
Yeah.
what it is. It's anywhere but here,
Yeah. If you're
Yeah.
anything but completely conscious, you'll take it. It's like whatever,
Exactly.
get me out of this mindset. Yeah,
Yes, get me out of the head because it's not a really great neighborhood to be in right now,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, see, to be honest, I don't blame you for that. That's an incredible heartbreak to go through, and for it to happen one after another, it's just
Yeah.
I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine what that would be like. But then
I got
you got sober, yeah.
yeah,
Which
I
is
got
amazing.
sober.
Fair play to you. It's class.
Yeah. It was it was like, but I got sober when I was 40, and it was just not, it wasn't it wasn't cute anymore, you know?
Hmm.
Like it just wasn't, it was I was hanging out with a lot of people who were younger than me. I was just doing things that just I would not, that I wasn't, that were just not good. You know, I didn't have any, I also didn't really have again, a moral compass. Like I was just like,
Okay.
fuck you. If you'd been through what I'd been through, you do whatever you want to. Like that was kind of my attitude,
Yeah.
you know, I can do whatever I want because I've been through this and this and this. And
Hmm.
that's not really okay, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
to think that way. But I did. But yeah, I stopped drinking when I woke up one day and I was like, oh, you blacked out again. That's it. You're done. And I was done.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought my life was over, you know, like I was like, how can I ever socialize again or have sex? Like I was like, I can't even imagine like what that, you know, I was like, I'm like, I'm taking 2 years off of everything. And it was, but you know, I thank God I did. And I did end up doing all those things that I
Yeah.
didn't think I could do. And you know, like life has not gotten a lot easier. You know,
Hmm.
they say like in addiction recovery, they're like, oh, your life is going to be so much better. And I'm like, you know, I'm alive and I'm doing all right, but I think I have so much crap that it's not like I'm I don't know exactly what I'm saying, but like I've realized too, like when I meet people and they know that or they learn that about me, my background, they're very kind of like, oh, whoa, you know, like this
Hmm.
girl's got a lot of heavy, she's got a, she's too intense because of what she's been through. And I get kind of labeled in a way as somebody who has had a lot of tragedy and like some people just don't want to deal with that, you
Yeah.
know, with as kind of like I've been stuck with that label.
Yeah.
And other people are like, you're amazing, you know, how are you so strong, how do you wake up in the morning? I'm like, well, when you don't have a choice, you know,
Yeah.
like what are you going to do? It's like, did I want to wake up? No. But like if I don't do it, and who's going to walk my dog? Really, my dog kept me alive, honestly,
Hmm.
when I got, so it just, it's, yeah, so it's been almost 10 years since I've had a drink. And
Incredible.
I love not having hangovers for sure.
Yeah, that's good. There's the big plus.
Yeah. Um, and I was you know, the Keith Richards of yoga teachers. That's what one boyfriend called me, which I was so proud. And now I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's
he's like,
good.
how do you do it? How do you like do what you do and then wake up and then go and teach, you know? And I was, and
Yeah, of
again,
all things, yoga is that's
exactly. And that's what I loved about it. It was like, it was so like the thing about the mafia boss and like it was just so not what you'd expect.
yeah,
And I really kind of got a thrill from that, you
yeah.
know?
Because I think everyone thinks like yoga teachers are like, oh yeah, thanks, yeah. And you're just
They're
not.
mental. They're all fucking mental. And I can't stand any of them anymore. But yeah, it's just, I loved getting one over on everyone.
Yeah.
You know? I was like, oh, you have no idea how they're like, you drink coffee? And like, oh, yeah. I do things that are much bigger stimulators than that, actually. So
Yeah. But hurry up, downward dog.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just just to finish off, I just wanted to ask you because I know you're writing. That's how we met. Um, is that something that you've enjoyed, or is it kind of what has that experience been like?
Um,
Like writing.
I don't know who said it, but I enjoy having written.
Yeah.
You know, yes, because it's like I do. when I'm done writing something, I'm like, ah, the feeling of accomplishment is, even if no one ever reads it, I'm just like, I did this thing.
Yeah.
And uh, but it's really hard. And anytime I try to write something that's not specifically about my background, my writing teacher is like, oh, no, 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 that's not interesting. You have to write about your family. And I'm like, for fuck's sake, like, I don't want to just write about that.
Yeah.
It's that's not who I want to just be, like
Yeah.
that. So
But that
that's,
isn't just who you are anyway.
I
So
know, but that's her. For her, she's all about this teacher. It's all about like, just get published no matter what. So like, start with something that's just going to be like, whoa, and then go from there. And it's just to relive it every time
yeah.
is just, it's just, who wants to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've been playing a little bit with like how to write about it without it being the main focus,
Hmm.
just sort of like, and that's why I started doing a little storytelling with, I don't think you were there that day, Chris. I did this story about something that I did, but I'm just going to put it this way. There's a dead body involved and lots of money and me.
Okay.
All right. And this
Wow.
happened and it's an incredible story. And, I mean, I didn't, the dead body wasn't my fault, but, like so I told the story to the group and I was like, this is so much more fun. It's kind of telling the story rather than writing it and then telling it.
Yeah.
Saying it is, and just to see people's like, they were like, and and then what happened? I'm like, well, they're like, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Like, well, tell us what happened after that. And then what happened after that? And I'm like, okay, this is fun,
Yeah.
because I do some crazy stories.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's cool. Yeah, because writing, obviously, I have only started writing. Like, I've written one thing and one thing only, and I'm sticking to it. But it's all based from truth, and I always like, I've never written anything other than
That
something that's actually happened to me. Obviously, yeah, artistic license and stuff, and change things. Um, but there's like, for you, so much more has happened to you, about you, and you have, like you said, you have so many more stories than just the sad ones. So you can write anything you
yeah,
want.
that's my problem, is like, I'm like, I don't know how to organize it all. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I'm like, okay, stop worrying about how you're going to organize and just sit
just
down and
write it.
write. Yeah,
100%.
exactly. And it's just, I'm so undisciplined. And so, how about you? Are you able to sit down and do it, or do
No,
you?
I'm very undisciplined. In terms of so with writing what I wrote, the play I wrote, um, I work well with a deadline. To be fair,
Yes.
so I had started it and then just left it for months. And then when we were doing the first group with Geraldine, I, I was like, oh, I need to write the next part for next week. So, and I write on my phone, which is so weird because I'm of the generation where we're very good at texting. So I write
Yeah,
on my phone.
I lie down and write like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I just, and I would write it all and then come to an end of a section and then just put my phone away. And the next time I read it was at the writing group. So I would be reading it and like laughing at things that I wrote. I'm like, geez, that's funny. Well done.
Yeah.
Because I had
You're like,
written it like a week before. I'm hilarious. I'm so funny. Yeah, so I like that process because it meant, it seemed like it wasn't me that wrote it, because
yeah,
there's a 5 minute section of me writing it, and God knows what's going through my head at that time. And I write it all, and then the next time I read it, it's like something fresh that I get to read, and I'm like, oh my God, this is really good.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I'm like, I wrote that. Like, you go into a headspace where you're just like, you're creative, like, just you let it flow. And then you later, when you're like not in that headspace and you read it, you're like, yeah, it's like, it's amazing what can come out of you, you know?
Yeah, I find it very
Yes.
difficult to write if I'm like, okay, you need to write. Okay,
Yeah. And like, sit
um,
down and write for an hour today. Yeah.
no, can't do it. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
do it. It's never gonna
I need
happen.
deadlines too. And I like to do it to the last second, like the 11th hour. And then I'm just like, okay, I have to do it. And then it actually works better for me,
Yeah.
because then I'm just like, this pressure, this like, one of the things, and I know we have to finish up, but after I stopped drinking, I realized that my ways of altering myself were like stress. Like, you're late for something or you have something to do, and that anxiety was the same as being altered. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow. I called myself out on that. I was like, oh, you're doing it again. You're just doing it in a different way. You're just trying to not be, by being stressed out and anxious. It's like, it wasn't me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that wasn't very fun.
No.
So, but still it works though. Like having a deadline and then waiting until you have to do it.
Yeah.
I like having that, like, you've got a gun to your head to do it. You got to do it. You're going to do it.
And then what comes out of it is like, oh yeah, I did it then. I did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's really good.
We
Listen,
probably
Jenny.
will give each other deadlines. Let's give each other deadlines. All right.
Yes, 100% we should. Okay, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate your honesty, and you're amazing. You're a legend. Love you to bits. Thank you so much.
I'll see you soon. Thank you so much, Chris. You too. Pleasure.
My pleasure.
Bye.
See you later. Bye. So you have it, folks. That was Jenny Aurthur. Join me next week when I am joined by radio host and sports commentator John Akers. He's an absolute legend. So join me next week for that. If you could, tell your friends about the podcast, like and subscribe to the video. This has been Playing Pretend with Chris McIlvenny. See you next week.